Welcome, family, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Indigeru podcast. Today, we are welcoming one of many phenomenal women that I have had the blessing to meet over the years. But she's our guest for this evening, and her name is Miss Janet Damon. How are you, Janet?
I'm wonderful. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. So, the Indigenous podcast is really just thinking about life, thinking about love, and the pursuit of mindfulness, and how we can infuse that into all areas of our life. And so when I thought about you, I thought about the series I'm doing on mindful families. And you absolutely, it was like, no doubt, like Janet needs to be a part of this. And looking at the work that you're doing in the community and just how you are with your family personally, I would like for you to introduce us to who you are, what you do. And then from there, I just want to ask you a few questions based upon the work that I've seen you do in the community. So can you share with us, Janet, who you are?
Yes. That's a beautiful question. So at some of the core of my identity is that, I am a mother, I am a librarian, and I love to be of service to my community. So I just am really rooted in service, predominantly because my family is a military family. So we grew up kind of internationally all over. And a lot of those experiences living in places like Panama and Germany and England and Korea, and also throughout the South, living in, Shreveport, Louisiana, as well as New Orleans, just kind of really have grounded me a lot in that love of the vibrant community that is the beloved community that we need, right, to surround us and to help us raise healthy, rooted children,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that you had the mixture of the stateside and the international living. And one of the things, and I guess it makes sense when I think about the vibrancy that you carry and the things that you're doing with your children in the community. It's like exposure is so important, right?
Yes.
Many different cultures, many different ways of being, many different socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's so impactful on a child's life to be exposed to these different things. So I didn't even know that, but now I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, if you can recall, when do you feel you began to be intentional about curating your community?
Actually, very early on. One of the things that I was really blessed with is that when I had my first daughter, I was pretty young, and I was really intentional about building a community of mothers that had wisdom and guidance to share with me. And so one of my, first real community building experiences was with a group of women who did gardening and natural healing, and just, I was really one of the youngest kind of, sisters in the circle, and all of them just poured so much wisdom, so much confidence, and actually gave me their stories. And I think that's really powerful and essential, is for us to learn to listen mindfully and deeply to the stories of those who have walked this path before us, because it's a gift, it's a treasure. And, in that intentional space, I was blessed that, I spent a number of years just really being mentored by these women in community. And so that gave me a different understanding of what it is to walk in my motherhood journey and what it is to walk as a woman. It just allowed me to hold space for the complexity of our lives, and to not assume who a woman is just because of her outward status or position in life, that all of us have wisdom to share and wisdom to be gained.
Absolutely. That is That's absolutely beautiful, and it's so, so necessary. And I do think, especially with young ladies that have children that are younger, it is, I mean, it's imperative, really, to
Yes.
have those women pouring into you, or those elders, men and whoever, pouring into you as you begin to walk your path and find your footing. And I think that that's beautiful, and I really pray and hope that for more young parents and more people in general to be more intentional about having people pour into them, because I think in this world right now it's almost expected. It's like, oh, you should just know what you're doing.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
should just, through osmosis, you're going to have everything that you need. And it's like, well, wait a minute, not necessarily. And even
Yeah.
if you do, there's value for you. There's also value in hearing someone else's experiences and hearing their stories.
Yeah.
So, starting with the birth of your older daughter is when you began to create this community. As that has evolved, you've had more children over the
Yes.
years.
Yes.
Um, what do you hope, or what do you desire that your children take away from the experiences that you provide for them and the way that you're raising them
Mm-hmm.
intentionally?
Um, well, that's interesting because I actually am very thoughtful about some of these lessons. And one is that young people need skills to develop strong, healthy, sustainable relationships that both are um, that have healthy boundaries and that they can advocate and give voice and agency to what um, their spirit is guiding them toward. And then the other piece is to, I am very deeply in tune with what gives me joy. And so I want my children to understand and to nurture the part of them that is playful, that needs new
Yeah.
experiences and vibrant experiences, to nurture intentionally your joy. And then this other piece is around recognizing that we're interconnected, that we have both a responsibility to our community and we are also nourished by our role in community. And so I definitely want them to understand their heritage and culture, but also to love and appreciate the heritage and culture of so many of the reflections of humanity, so that they see themselves as connected to that families who are thriving and building in Morocco, as well as folks who are, building families in Canada, to folks who are just that we
Yeah,
are all interconnected in that way.
that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I know you come from a mixed heritage background.
Mm-hmm.
Were your parents also super intentional with cultivating that appreciation with you, or is that something that you discovered on your own journey?
Mm. My parents did not give that as much thought. They were not necessarily intentional, like, appreciating other cultures, though they modeled it in the way they lived.
Right.
Both of my parents, even now, I was at their house the other day and my mother had gotten, she was making us a Korean dish, a bulgogi.
Mm-hmm.
And, she had gotten out the flame. You cook it over like a flame that's on one of those hot grill that has gas. And so her neighbors from across the street are from India, and they brought over all of this food just because they wanted to tell my parents thank you for always being helpful neighbors. And it was a holiday, it was a tradition that honors teachers and wisdom carriers in India. So it happens,
Wow.
every year that they honor all the teachers in their lives. And so they were giving my parents this gift. And I sat and I thought, oh, we're about to have this Korean Indian mashup, this fusion mix. It's like phenomenal. So their lives are always that they can be in relationship with people of different backgrounds, though not necessarily, stating it that way. But the
Yeah.
other piece that my parents did is they nurtured a lifelong relationship with nature. So just like
Mm-hmm.
most folks, I feel like, who are from especially the South, especially Texas, there's a bonding with the land. And so my father definitely always was out fishing, always had us. I mean, I don't think I saw a cartoon, until I was like 12 or 13, because we were always fishing on weekends. And my mother's Buddhist, and she's from Busan. And so she also loves nature, always took us on a walk every night, always had a garden, always grew flowers, surrounded us with tons of natural beauty. And so I think they gave me a praxis that has a mix of these things, that it's ecology, it's community, it's relationship, it's respect, it's love, you know.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because obviously what I've observed of you and the different activities with your family and the things that you're curating within your family group and your friend groups, nature is always a theme. And when you think about just the space to get quiet and get still and be mindful and process your thoughts and meditate and whatever that looks like, a lot of times it's much easier to do that in nature, whether you're at the beach or you're hiking, or there's just this sense of groundedness that takes place when you're in nature. And I love that, without being, without your parents promoting it, that they were just being and
Yeah.
still able to instill.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of us, and for myself, and I think you could possibly agree, when we're bringing our children into these scenarios, it's not so much to be dogmatic about what it should be, but to open up opportunity for what it could be for them.
Yes.
As you are raising your children, and you mentioned that you're a librarian, what is your favorite part about being a librarian, and that, just talk about that. I know it's something that you're super passionate about, and I just want you to share what your favorite parts are about that.
I am so passionate about being a librarian. And it's so funny because even sometimes in my best dreams, I am a librarian. So it's a huge part of my identity. And it's so interesting because I think that it's something that, I think, first of all, stories and storytelling is, it is integral to who we are as human beings. And it's a way to have a compass, to navigate very difficult experiences, emotions, is to have it be grounded in stories that we tell. I also love the research and science of stories, of what it does in terms of our biochemistry, in terms of what is released in our bodies during a story, that we see our cortisol levels decrease, that we see our oxytocin increase, that we see even this, that when we're hearing a story together, that our minds kind of become attuned, that we see that, when they've done studies and had, this neural imaging done, when people are listening to one story, they get this synchrony, this mental synchrony in their minds. And so I think that, that is part of the hardware of our humanity, is that we were to gather and listen to stories together and come away with lessons about our humanity, about how we treat one another, and also cautionary tales around, what that we need to think about in terms of the future. So I think there's so much power in it. I think that also too, for me, it's part of the curiosity that I have as a human being. I am an intensely curious person. And so I spend a lot of time just nurturing all of my curiosities. And so I love story and books for that experience as well, of being able to research and to go deeper into subjects. And I just believe in equity, that every child needs that experience. My father definitely cultivated that in me when I was young. Every summer, and I remember this fondly, but every summer my father would have a research project that I would do, and I could pick any topic that I wanted to become an expert in. And
this was your homework?
This is my learning pod, right? Like, my dad was my first and best teacher, and he still is. And I would and he would ask me questions, and he would, at the end of this project, I would usually have a 20-page handwritten paper, and we would go for a celebration. And so the idea of learning has always been fused with the idea of joy for me.
Wow. And it's so interesting when you began to talk about the storytelling. The first thing that came to mind is almost like you're a modern day griot, but
Mm,
also like not that you are like, yes, you will tell some stories, but also it's greater than that because you're curating stories for people to be exposed to. And I guess maybe that's the modern portion of it, because
yeah,
even if you aren't personally telling those stories, you are channeling those stories through how you're curating these library spaces. And I love it. I love every ounce of it because
yeah.
it's amazing. It's
And,
absolutely amazing.
and I think for me, I love that analogy because it isn't this, you're right. It's not necessarily that I'm the storyteller, but my goal is that I am continuing to be a guide, almost like showing this map of stars that said there are infinite number of stars, but if you need this kind of constellation to be your guide, here are some places that you could go and find those guiding messengers, those messages that are held in these books and these authors right now. And I also think about, my father, when he was young, there wasn't a library in his community, but there were there were women who drove a bookmobile. And so my dad,
That's cute.
he used to love to wait at the edge of the street for the bookmobile
Mhm.
ladies to come. And then he would get his little books and then bring them back. And that is part of what I would love to see myself be able to do in retirement is have like, some kind of mini bookmobile slash, tea kind of setup where we could just park it, read, discuss, have tea or coffee, and just continue to cultivate a life of the mind. It is so
Yeah.
important.
I can totally see you doing that, and like you're on your Miss Frizzle real quick, of the
Yes,
life of
yes.
books. You're like, listen, come into my worlds, and then all of
Come,
a
let's
sudden,
sit down, let's talk about it.
yes, we're falling into these books and these stories.
Mhm.
Um, as you're curating these these books and these experiences, I know you've done some pop-ups and things like that. Do you find, or what has been some feedback maybe that you've gotten from your community actually becoming more mindful and more intentional about the books that they seek out? Or the work that you're doing within the school system, have you found that there's been a ripple effect within their community where they're now being more intentional because of what you've highlighted in your work?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I see definitely folks reaching out for different books and bringing them back to kind of being center right now
Hmm.
because there is so much that parents are struggling to talk about with their children. And a story is a beautiful way to be able to navigate that. But what's interesting is this summer we kind of did a broader experience. So we did the Black to Nature Book Club. And this was, we gave away free books at the different hikes. And then it ended up becoming birding and botany and, ropes courses and zip lining and kayaking and canoeing.
Yeah.
And, we did this in partnership with both the nonprofit, well, it's just really a social, like stand up, of,
Hmm.
what we're doing. But, Afros and Books, and then doing that with Black Packers, which the executive director had just taken a 400, I think an 80-mile journey from Denver to Durango walking. And I think,
What is her name
yeah, it's
again? Can you remind me?
Patricia Cameron.
Patricia Cameron. Okay, I think I did see that. And I think I saw her like destination pic where she's like, I made it. And I was
I
like,
know, I know. And so just partnering with different organizations to, one of my favorite partnerships has also been with the Pirates football team. And this
okay.
was to around student athletes. And then the Warrior Nation football executive director reached out to do that with his athletes. And we've done collections at Urban Peak Youth Shelter. We're just starting a partnership with the Gilliam Youth Detention Facility. And so we're really in with getting fathers together to do the Black Dads Reads, and then just partnering with the African American Excellence Task Force. And what you find is that literacy and books have a place everywhere. everywhere. There's, whether it would be a culinary institute, whether it would be, a healing centered collective. We've done work with with mental health providers and therapists. Mindfulness, one of the things I talk about is just a few minutes, just to take 6 minutes of reading for our heart rate to slow down, for us to find that space to breathe more deeply. And you see it happen in story times all the time. Children's whole bodies begin to relax.
Their whole demeanor. Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that, because even though you're talking about all these different partnerships in all these different areas, it really does tie back to your original statement where you talked about all the different communities and backgrounds of people that you were exposed to. When I don't know that I mean, my mom used to tell me all the time that was her escape. That was how she was able to even comprehend the world that she wanted for herself that looked very different than what she was experiencing. And then I think about myself. I'm an avid book lover, have been my entire life as well, but being exposed to these different worlds, these different stories, it actually gives you a frame of reference to even decide what you want your world to look like.
Absolutely.
And that's an amazing gift to anybody.
Yeah.
Period.
One of the things too, I think that's important that we often don't give ourselves time for is that my root values, I have 5 very strong rooted values, and almost everything in my life is a reflection of those 5. And that is that family, friendships, fun, and health, and freedom. Those are all the 5 things that guide my purpose, And so when, in looking at the gatherings that we did over the summer, we had upwards of 40 folks come out in the midst of this pandemic to do nature-related activities, but also just to see each other, to connect, to wave, to have children play, to be in nature, to have a space where you felt psychologically safe. And that just reminded me of the power of just having community. And we lose that. I think different things happen. I think before the pandemic, it was that we were also busy, right? We live in a very individualistic society that really promotes this idea of one family, one winner, one path you can take, one way that success looks like. But as I get older, I just more and more see that the collectivist approach, that we as a community, when we come together, we have so much more of everything, so much more joy, more wisdom, more fun, more support, more creativity. And that, it was really been a disservice to us to be embedded in this kind of individualistic mindset around things. So, originally MixMomma was like a blog just to get people out to festivals and spaces. But the more I see what's happening in the world, as more as I realize that we just need this in service of being interconnected and in community with one another. Because you can read all about different cultures in stories and books and still feel out of place when you're actually in the presence of someone from a different walk of life. So you need to have both. This idea of what it is to understand a culture and be respectful and to appreciate it, but you also have to be able to be in relationship with the people and cultures and communities that are represented. And that comes from authentic, being in each other's space,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like you said, when you're in community and everyone is coming to the table, your strengths and your weaknesses are okay, because there's going to be someone else in this community who is stronger where you're weaker, and vice versa. And that pressure, or that expectation that society has on us, you get some relief. You feel that burden being lifted off of your shoulders, because you get to just be, and you're okay, and you are enough.
Yes.
Without constantly trying to, no, I have to present this whole perfect picture, or else I'm just not good enough. Where it's like, well, let's all 30 of us get together, and together we are We're
Yeah.
whole and we're balanced, and it's okay. We don't have to strive um, for this like unattainable goal, you
So
know?
true.
We can be
So
our best self, right? Of course, you
yeah.
want to continuously evolve and become your best self, but you don't have to feel like, I've got to be the scientist and the doctor and the da 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 da. No, honey, let me reach out
Mm,
to you over here. Is that your
yeah.
gift? Come on.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I really, I do think that that's been something that's come up for people. Not so much that they're enough, prayerfully, that is a conclusion, but having a true and honest self assessment because we've been with ourselves quietly. I mean, now things are open and people are moving more, but I think initially there was this quiet that was over the nation where it was like, honey, you don't have anywhere to go but to be with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a forced mindfulness moment, an extended moment.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like,
Yes.
but like you said, as we emerged into these different stages and had to make some decisions about what's actually important to us and what are we going to get back to,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, those core values highlighted themselves and you were able to actually put that into action. And
Yes.
so that's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
um, Overall, and you may have touched on it a little bit, how do you think mindfulness has played a larger role in your life in all areas?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's so interesting because I do practice, I have mindfulness practices and meditation that we do that I think when my youngest was probably 2 or 3 is when we started because I think one of the first times I had set up my meditation space, she came in and I had, my music, my candle, I was deep in thought. And then she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm meditating." And she said, "I don't want you to make a caking." And I was like, "I'm not making a cake, babe. I'm meditating." She's like, "I don't want you to make a taking. I want you to play." And I was like, and so she's so, I had to get them on board. And so I said, this is a special time for all of us. We can all
Mm-hmm.
pick a space in mommy's bedroom, wherever, however you want to sit, and we're just going to do this for maybe 5 minutes and then maybe next week 10. And so they were able to kind of get with it. They recognized how they felt after. I would always ask, well, how do you feel now? And they always felt, I feel so good. I feel ready for to relax. And so I think as early as we can, giving our kids a peace practice, a mindfulness practice, a self-care practice, I think they need all of those things to be
Yeah.
able to navigate a very, I think the world has changed in that way that I was not, and I don't think any of us in my age group were as as connected by devices and phones and everything on a 24-hour kind of loop and
Mm-hmm.
cycle as these, our young people are now. And so I think to be able to thrive in this moment in time, you need to have self-awareness to when you need to put these things away and take time for yourself to go for your walk, go for your visit with a friend, chat with a neighbor across the street. Just we need to give our children the tools that are going to allow them to thrive in a world that is increasingly stressful and in a world that also is becoming more isolated. When you
Yeah.
look at the data around loneliness, we have an epidemic of loneliness in our country, even prior to COVID. So when you look at the fact that like 40% of millennials did not feel like they had one close friend, that we have,
Wow.
yeah, like there's a study that was done by Cigna and it was like 16,000 participants. And you look at, they could even see a trend generationally. So our baby boomers are actually highly connected, but when we look at our young people, when you think about deep friendships that have been nurtured over many years and just having that best friend who's in your life, a lot of it became supplemented with my friend online or my Facebook
Mhm.
friends or my folks I chat with on Instagram. But in terms of having experiences together, you know, they
Mm.
say that a good friend knows all your best stories, but a best friend lived them
Was
with you,
there with you. Yeah.
with you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think about, you know, I think I recognized maybe a couple years ago that I really wanted my children to be intentional about that friend space. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I'm happy that if they keep their friends they have now for a while, they'll have those friends like I do that
Mhm.
they had in elementary and middle school that are still kind of, you know, part of their life who remember you from before you really came into the
Came
fullness of
in.
yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
And I love that. And the other thing you mentioned, I wanted to go back to it. A lot of times we don't consider bringing our children into what we're doing. I know there's days where I'm like, can I have 10 minutes, please? You know, and but then I think back to when my children were younger and like nap time and in calming moments of snuggling, and we both fell asleep and things like that. It was a collective rest. But then somehow we forget that the collective rest was actually the most nourishing, and we want it to be very separate and, you know,
Mhm.
compartmentalized. And I love just that concept of bringing it in. And, you know, people are now doing virtual learning at home and working from home. And I just think that that's such like that jewel right there, like maybe creating spaces in our day where we take our lunch break or a 15, our children are taking a lunch break, and we're just having mindful, relaxing breaks, but together. So we're still nurturing that connection piece, and we're
Mhm.
also getting some chill that we
Yes.
need ourselves, because you're right. It's like that's one of the things. And I will say this, you know, I'm in my late 30s, so I'm in that little generation that's right in between Generation X and millennials. It's like the early 80s and the
Okay.
last 2 years of the
Is it
70s.
Y? Is it Generation Y?
I don't know what it is. It might be why, but it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I made it through high school basically with
Mm.
the little running man, the AOL man, still trucking across the screen.
Yes, and I was in college when AOL was on.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, I had a pager.
Mhm.
You know, so my childhood was not based in that. And so
Yeah.
I do think there's a benefit, because then I've taught my children, no, go outside and play for
Yes.
hours. I'll put some
Yes.
snacks on the front door and
Yes.
goodbye.
Yes.
And I think about my oldest, she's almost 18. Oof. She came to me a few months ago and she's like, Mom, like, thank you
Mm.
for encouraging me to stay connected.
Mm.
um her best friend she's known since she was 6 years old, but these are the girls that she was outside for 8+ hours
Mm.
playing. And through cross country moves and moving back and all of this, they've stayed connected via technology. And now we're at the college stage. Her best friends are both a year older than her, so they're both off to
Oh.
college, kind of, not literally, actually. But they're beginning that walk.
Mhm.
And she's like, you were always telling me, like, oh, you should reach out, or, oh, you should do this, and oh, you should. I said, yeah. I said, but think about it. If you never make another friend in your life, you have two solid friends,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
know who you are. They
Yes.
went with you through the awkward
Yes.
stage, the
Yes.
braces, the
Yes.
oatmeal crust in your mouth when you woke up and just ran outside to play as soon as breakfast was over.
Yes.
And they've watched you blossom also into this amazingly beautiful, creative young woman.
Yes.
And how rare that is,
Yes.
to someone not meet you with your credentials and whatever it is that they value about you in this adult moment. You have people that have been down for you out the
Yes.
gate.
Yes.
And I am hoping that more people, like, even in this whatever stay-at-home quarantine moment, the kids have come out of the house.
Yes. You see them biking and skateboarding.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, look at this.
I
Like,
love it.
I love it.
That's been like one of my favorite parts with my 11-year-old, because I was like, man, because she listens to stories of my oldest like it's some other long lost world. Woohoo!
Mm.
And um, we had a neighbor, the mom actually came and knocked on our door. So they live way down the block, but they would walk through the neighborhood. So they were scouting out where they saw people with children.
Aw.
So she knocks on my door one day, and basically it was like an old school moment. So I'm at the door, she's at the door. She's like, "Can our daughters be friends?"
Oh, so
Yes,
sweet.
yes, please. And so, obviously it takes children to actually like each other and personalities, and it turned out that they actually do enjoy each other. But,
Mm.
skating and biking and girl talk. And then if they still want to talk later, they both have cell phones.
Yeah.
Um, they started FaceTiming cartoons. Like one will watch a cartoon, and then they'll laugh and talk as they watch these cartoons in the evening.
Oh my gosh, so sweet.
And I just thought, wow, again, that's like a modern version.
Mm-hmm.
But connection is never going to not be important to us as human
That's right.
beings,
That's right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for the pause, and I'm
Mm.
grateful for, these values being highlighted and people reaching out. I don't think that she would have ever knocked on the door
Mm. Right.
if,
And yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And
People are already
so
looking.
it who goes and knocks on, you know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
also 2020 and people are like, I'm not doing that. That's
Yeah.
weird. But I'm like, we live
Yeah.
in the same neighborhood, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So I absolutely love that. And I love to see people like yourself, like super intentional in your professional life, in your personal life. And I love that, who you are is in everything. I didn't know that you had the five tenets and the values, but I absolutely see that. And I want you to know that it's not going unnoticed, and
Mm. Mm.
the ripple is fierce. And
Oh,
I appreciate
thank
you being
you.
yourself
I appreciate
and
you.
showing
I
up.
appreciate you.
So for those of in the audience that would like to follow you and maybe get some ideas about how they can cultivate intentional community wherever they live, where can
Mm.
they find you?
So they can find me at MixMomma is my Facebook page. I actually have two. So I have MixMomma, which is more events and ways that people can come together and find fun things to do, but it's kind of local to Denver. But then we also have Afros and Books, which are books that you can read with your family, with your children. I think that there are so many incredible books that are coming out. I know that I have to restrain myself a little bit because there's so many incredible books being written right now. And
Mm-hmm.
then, the things that people can just do is just to think about those core values and really curate a life that nourishes and that supports it. And I think good practices around mindfulness, around interconnectedness, and around being, savoring the joy, savoring these precious moments. My kids sometimes will borrow my phone to even look at all of these memories of places that they've been and all these things that they've had. They're just like, man, it's been such a beautiful journey. When we're intentional, we can just have such a beautiful journey.
Yeah. And those memories will never, ever leave them. And I think that's probably something that sparked, I don't know, and I just looked and I'm like, she does so much with her children.
Mm.
And I didn't do nearly that much with my mom growing up, but
Mm.
what she did do is still resonating in my life,
Yes.
where I'm like, wow. And those were just, some intentional trips out of the country and just these things here. And then, looking then at the things that I've done with my children and different things that they reflect on. And I'm like, it doesn't take a lot, but what you're doing for yourself and your community is literally going to resonate for generations.
Mm.
And I love to see it. I'm
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, like, you're at the sand dunes, you're at the hot spring. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is so lit. Like,
Oh, it's I tell you, like, I I feel very, very blessed, just to have the community and the sisterhood and the loving relationships, because I told my husband right when COVID was happening, and I was having to cancel some of our plans, and we had just come back from Mardi Gras, and it was like 2 weeks later that things were starting to happen. And that weekend I was supposed to go to a holy festival. I was supposed to go, like, all these things. And my husband's like, this is going to be a hard time for you. And I said, you know what, though? I think this is going to be actually the relationships. It's going to, before I was out exploring and doing all these things outward, but now it's going to be the same experience, but doing it in the relationships and in the interconnective tissue that we have in community. And that is what really has manifested, the depth of relationships, like that we built memories together with so many families during this journey, and so many first times, like first time on a canoe, like that, the hilarious, the funny things that happened that day, I think we're always going to kind of like giggle and chuckle and have that together. And community, that's what we should have been doing all along. I realized that even in self-reflecting, that a lot of these experiences were with my kids and my family, but I should have been more intentional to make it community doing this together, because it's been 10 times more fun,
yeah,
if that's possible.
I know. It's like, it's infinite possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you so much,
Thank
Janet, for
you.
joining us for our Mindful Family series. It's been an honor chatting with you and just getting some background on some things, and hopefully people will follow you and gain some inspiration on how they can do the same in their everyday lives with their own families. And I will talk to the rest of you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.